Hello there, kia ora. It's not very often I get to make a video like the next day that highlights the point I was trying to make in the video yesterday, but, well, I guess them's the breaks. You see, yesterday I tried to point out that the opinion polls that we got from One News, while they're really an interesting thing to sit down and look at, they're more of a guide. You want trends to be able to follow to work out what they mean and not to take the specifics into too much detail. But today we had a second poll come out, which gives me a chance to highlight exactly what I meant about trends. You see, the Talbot Mills poll, which was an internal poll done by the Labour Party, was leaked to NewsHub yesterday afternoon, possibly because it shows pretty much the same thing, with a few interesting differences. Yeah, let me show you what I mean. Okay, this here is a graph that shows polling done for all of the parties in Parliament at the moment. The blue column represents where they stood on election night last year. The black column represents the Kantar poll, the green column represents the Talbot Mills poll, and the brown column represents the average of those two polls that have been done so far. If you take a look, for example, at the National Party, which is the first column here, you can see a steady decline happening. If you take a look at the Labour Party, the second lot in here, you can see a steady increase happening. To the point now where, according to the Talbot Mills poll, there is only 1 percentage point between the two. If you look at something like ACT and Te Pāti Māori in this poll, though, you can see that they both have the same results under both Talbot Mills and Kantar, which is another indicator that the polls that we're looking at were pretty accurate. Also, if you see some differences there between New Zealand First and the Greens. For example, the Greens had a slight drop in the Talbot Mills poll, whereas New Zealand First had a slight increase compared to yesterday's Kantar poll, the difference being one would put them in Parliament and one wouldn't. And the average for New Zealand First puts them really borderline for being in Parliament if an election was held tomorrow. And of course, that's not going to happen. It's going to be at least 6 months away before we have another election, depending on how upset Winston Peters or David Seymour gets. And that's quite possible when you see the sort of things that David Seymour did, say, yesterday as an example, where he showed up to the Prime Minister's media stand-up unannounced, basically to say, we're not afraid of polls, why would we be scared of them? And throw his weight around. Or to basically go to the Prime Minister. It could be both, to be honest. And these polls aren't likely to shift too much more in favour of the government anytime soon because people are starting to really feel the impacts of having this group in power. For example, this report that came out from the Commerce Commission yesterday highlighted that we're still dealing with record level highs of inflation when it comes to things like our produce, our food, our rents, and our power. It's about 6.5% up on where it was 12 months ago. So clearly that laser focus on the cost of living hasn't really helped anyone. On top of that, today is the first day that fares for kids under the age of 12 and half-price bus fares for people under the age of 25 is gone. So now, again, kids have to pay for buses. And I got to admit, I have a real bugbear about kids going to school having to pay for transport. It has always, always bugged me. But to make kids pay for that is a really, well, it's not great. For example, this is a policy that, according to research, more heavily impacts low-income earners than it does high-income earners. But there's a whole bunch of other sort of stuff that occurs as well. Bus fares themselves generally don't have a huge impact in the number of people who take public transport. The bigger impact is on where buses go and the services that are provided and making sure that they are quality. They move where people move. But it's really hard for our regional councils who organise our public transport systems to be able to plan that when funding's been removed for things like public transport to go on pothole repairs. Instead of dealing with what causes the issues of potholes happening, the government decided to take money from public transport and funnel it into pothole repairs and tell people that they were brilliant. It's called vice signaling. It's in my newsletter this week. If you haven't already subscribed, there's a link in my bio. What we're seeing, though, is that decisions that this government is making are going to start impacting people's cost of living more and more, and it's already ridiculously high. It isn't coming down anytime soon. And when it happens, you're less likely to see favourable polls for the politicians and the parties that are in power, which is not good news for the current coalition. No government in their first term has ever polled this badly before. That's not a good sign for them whatsoever, and the reaction, like David Seymour doing this, that doesn't bode well either. Anyway, that's it for this week, or today anyway, but I have news for you. If you've got nothing to do on Sunday, I'm sitting down with Professor Robert Patman from Otago University, and we're going to sit down and talk about things like AUKUS and the Ukraine and Gaza. So, feel free to tune in and watch live. Me and Blake are going to be interviewing Robert, and then I'll have somebody else lined up for afterwards as well. It'll be streamed live on my YouTube and Facebook pages. So again, follow those. They're linked in my bio if you haven't come across them already. But yeah, in the meantime, if you haven't already, go and make sure that your kids have got their bus ticket card things all sorted out, because they are definitely going to need them over the next couple of weeks.